What's going on, everybody? It's Libthims here. Today we're going to discuss the question, how am I moved? With focus on whether the thing moved is an animal, such as a monkey, or a human, and what the great thinkers of history have had to say on the matter. To discuss this question, we're going to follow along this history of human motion theory timeline, which I made in the last 5 hours, from the Egyptian view to Pythagoras to Kepler, Descartes, who is famous for saying that the soul, or AMI, is in the pineal gland, and that's what moves people, to Newton, Holbach, Frode, Goethe, Maxwell, Bohr, Wald, Bartels, up to the modern human chemical thermodynamic view of things. So to begin with, or along the way, we will have to learn the new dating system shown by A67, which equals 2022 in Anno Domini years. And we will also have to learn isopsephy, which is shown by these numbers 3 and 101. Before we get into that, however, the reason I made this timeline was that when I woke up today, I was thinking about the letter Y, which is called the Pythagorean letter. And that, according to Pythagoras, the lower portion is the stem of a person's birth at the bottom. When one moves upward, the body is here, and the body is moved by what Pythagoras called the anima, or in Greek, alpha, nu, iota, mu, alpha, which has a Ne, or numerical equivalence value, of 102, and it is deciphered as Ra's motion principle, as we will discuss shortly. But according to Pythagoras, if you go up the bigger branch of the letter Y, which is easier, you'll end up turning towards vice. And this branching point here is the point of the moral choice of a person, whether they will choose the path of vice or virtue. Virtue is narrower and harder, but at the end you will be satiated in the mind, and if you choose the path of vice, you will become demonized, so to say. And this is the U model, or why we call, or where the word U comes from. And the letter Y comes from the Greek alphabet, and it is the 22nd letter, upsilon. And it has a numerical value of 400, which is the value of the letter itself. And this is what is the basis of Greek isopsephy. So alpha has a value of 1, and it's the first letter. Beta, the second letter, has a value of 2, and then it goes downward until we get to iota, has a value of 10, 10th letter. Kappa has a value of 20, and it's the 11th letter, and this goes all the way down until we get to 27 letters in the Greek alphabet, or Sampi, which has a value of 900. So today's focus is going to be on upsilon. And if you add up all the letters in upsilon, U, P, Psi, I, L, O, N, it has a value of 1260. And this number yields what is called a secret name. So isopsephy is Greek for equal pebbles. So if we go to our A Biosm book here, chapter I for iced up Cephi, we see that A is a 1 pebble letter, so it has a value of 1. Beta is a 2 pebble letter, so it has a value of 2. Delta is a 4 pebble letter and has a value of 4. And we have words like alpha, beta has a value of 3. Or if we switch B with an A, we end up with Ba, which is the value or the Egyptian word for the soul. Now, at present, I haven't yet figured out exactly what this secret name of 3 is in respect to the soul. But the Egyptian model, which was conceived before the pyramids were built, states that inside of a human, one has a heart. And inside of the heart is a Ba, which was considered the soul of Ra. And this was conceived in about 2500 BC in Dionysian calendar years, or the year 4455A. Now A in this case stands for Anno Atom, or year of seen atoms. And this comes from the new Animating calendar dating system, which is used in HMOpedia. So, for example, the new A Biosm book was published in 66 AE. And if you turn, that means Anno Elementium, that means the year atoms were seen, which occurred in 1955 in Dionysian calendar years. So if you go to the title page, we see that these are all ciphers that trace back to the sun, the moon, the stars. But for our purposes, this book was published on 11 October 66 AE, and that's what's called the standard Anno Elementium notation. So right here, we have the equivalences in our Anno Elementium conversion table sheets, which you can download and print out. So today, or the year presently, is 2022 AD, which is a mythical year, invented by Dionysius, and in Anno Elementium years it's 67. And this calendar system was invented in 65 AE, and in 1955 is the year atoms were first seen through the field ion microscope. So that correlates to 0 AE. Now, A notation is new. That was invented recently in order to shorten the use of double acronyms. So if we go to the Elementum calendar page, we see the new dating system that atoms seen replaces the Jesus calendar and the Muhammad calendar, or Christian and Islamic calendar. But here we see at right the A notation. So if the year is after 1955, the A goes before the number, and that reduces the amount of notation that needs to be employed to state the year from 4 digits to 3 digits. So 2020 can equal 65 AE or anno elementium, or it can equal A65. And this is the new shorthand notation. And 1955 equals 0 AE, which equals 0A, meaning that this is the A comes after the 0 in this case, whereas 1 AE, which would equal 1956, the A comes before the 1. Now if the years are before 1955, then the A goes after the number, and the number comes before the A, signifying that this is 146 years before atoms were seen, or 1809, which is when Goethe published his elective affinities. And we'll look at his model of how people move in a few minutes. So the pyramids Khufu pyramid was built in 455 before elements, or minus 2600 in Needham notation, or 2600 BC in Dionysian years, or 4555 BE before elements, or 4555A, which is the shorthand notation. This is real quick. It's being used more so than, or both of these are being used, but the A notation is the shortest version. So how this timeline started was that I woke up today and I have recently deciphered where anima comes from and why we call a monkey an animal and a human an animal. And so Pythagoras accordingly had this motion theory that the body of a human was moved by its anima. So I wanted to go backwards and forward and see how this has changed over the 5,000 years. So this is the deciphered version of where the word animate, animal, animi, which means mind, animos, which means breath, anime, which means soul, or animum, which means soul or movement when it's translated into Latin or Greek. So the sum of the letters alpha, nu, iota, mu equals 100. So that is the value of anum. And that equals 100, or 101, sum of these four letters in Greek. If we add up A, it's 1, plus N is 50, plus iota is 10, plus mu is 40, and we get 101, which is the same as if we take Ra in Greek, which is rho, which equals 100, plus alpha, and we get 101. So Anum is the secret name of Ra. So Ra is the Egyptian sun god. So heat is, according to the Egyptians, is what animates things, particularly in the Nile, where light shining on wettened earth will create life or animation. Here we see plant animation. And that's where we get the words animal and animate. And while we're here, we might also point out that, well, anima, if we had In A, we get the value of 102, which became, in the time of Lucretius, in his On the Nature of Things, the word that he used for soul or movement, but he also used the word anime with an I, and that is equals 111, and that is a cipher, or has the secret name of Paideia, whose letters also equal 101. And Paideia is the root word of encyclopedia, or the pedia part of it. Encycla means circular, and Paideia equates to 111, and it was called by Plato something like the secrets of education or secrets of knowledge. And Paideia translates back in Egyptian mythology as the mind of Ra. We know this because Maat, the goddess of moral order of the universe, was born out of Ra's head. And Maat has a secret principle called Ma, which is mu AA, which equals 42. So mu equals 40 plus alpha equals 42. And so 42, of course, is the number of gnomes in Egypt, the number of negative confessions of the soul, the number of gnome gods, the number of generations from Abraham to Jesus in Christianity, and so on. And this goes back, the number itself can be derived from Osiris mythology. So we'll just look at that real fast. So if we go to the Osiris page, and we go to Biblos, we see that pi equals 3 plus 14 over 100. And 3 times 14 equals 42. 14 is the number was sacred to the Egyptians because it was thought of as the number of days of the waxing or waning moon, and there was 3 crop seasons in Egypt. So that's where 42 comes from right here. And Egyptians thought that 42 was so sacred that they divided up. 14 is the number of days of waxing, waning moon. Osiris is cut up into 14 pieces by Set in the myth of their battle. And the Egyptians in about 2000 BC cut up, or they divided, each one of these is a gnome. Each one of these divisions is like a state or territory of Egypt, and they divided Egypt into 42 gnomes to signify the 42 parts of Osiris, and his body was, the green part is considered the body of Osiris, or the crops that grow along the Nile River. So, getting back to our diagram, the original model is that the Ba is inside of the heart, which is considered the soul of Ra, and that's what moves people. So here is the basic model of the Egyptian human. We're not going to go into all the details, but the main thing is Ba was the moving principle, and that got carried through up to the present day. So when you ask a typical person, how am I moved, we get something like this. This is a 2015 film, and the average person, who is basically a dodo head compared to the era of the universal geniuses, which ceased in the period of Helmholtz, who was said to have been the last of the last universal geniuses, to possibly Nietzsche, when he wrote his various books. His last being The Will to Power, when he said the world was a monster of energy. But if you ask the average person, they'll say, oh, I move myself. A thing that moves itself, however, is a violation of the principle of inertia. So if we go to the self-motion page of eoht.info, we will see that Da Vinci in 490 said that no thing whatever can be moved by itself, but its motion is affected through another. There is no other force. So Da Vinci said that a thing which moves itself is a violation of the principle of inertia and hence impossible, and in other words, is code for a perpetual motion theory. So a person who says, I move myself, believes in perpetual motion theory of human movement. So to cite one example, D.M.R. Seeker, who is an Indian chemical engineer, who I got into some sort of debate with when I explained to him in 2000, or I explained to him the exchange force theory of motion. That is, the photon is the carrier of the force, and the electromagnetic force mixed with the gravitational force is what moves humans. He said, I cannot stop but laugh at myself when I think that I am not alive or I am not moving myself. So we went from the Egyptian model to the Pythagorean U model, and to show what this looks like, here we have the Pythagorean letter, and if you're moving along, you're born here and you move up the harder or the easier path of vice, and you move towards eating lots of being gluttonous, eating good, drinking lots of wine, eating bread, you end up falling into the flames. But if you choose the virtuous path, which is harder, there's pricklies and thorns on the side of the letter is narrower, and you see yourself being attacked by, or you see the person being attacked by various vicious animals. At the end, you will be sated in the mind, like Marcus Aurelius, supposedly shown here, the wise emperor philosopher. So the question is, how did the Pythagorean model of movement, what exactly moves a person to go in this direction or this direction at this point here? That's what we're going to focus on. So in line with this Pythagorean model, this was carried forward for nearly 2 millennia until Kepler began to grapple with how planets are moved. And he believed that planets were moved by an angel flapping their wing, and that this was a body of mass, and the angel was the sort of Christian rescript of the Ba, or Ra's soul. So this belief carried forward all the way up into Kepler. And Feynman, of course, laughed at this, as saying, oh, how could Kepler believe that planets were moved by an angel flapping their wing? By 1640, Descartes, in his On the Nature, or in his treatise on the soul, or a treatise on the passions, said that, or conjectured that what he called the ami, which is the French word for the Latin anima, or anum, which as we've shown is the Egyptian or the Greek isops epicipher for Ra's motion principle, said that the ami, or soul, is located in the pineal gland, and that this is what moves people. And next we have Newton, who, building on Descartes and Kepler, in 281a stated that he believed that animals have self-motion, which was God-given, but that in the future we might be able to discern whether this is spiritual based or mechanically explained. Whereas, of course, things other than animals, such as planets, Newton worked out the 3 laws of motion. And again, the word animal itself comes from anum, or it's a raw cipher. And the secret name of animal 132 is all or whole, or apan. So next we have Holbach, and he published his book, The System of Nature, which was thoroughly atheistic, and he explained everything in terms of matter and motion. And this was in 185a, and he explained that when animals move, it's through affinity. Next we have Goethe, who, building on Newton's Query 31, said that if two things, such as A and B, are bonded with a bonding bracket, whether it be two chemicals or two humans, and a third species is introduced, where the force of affinity, the dart here being the affinity force, or showing the direction of the force, is stronger from A to C than between A and B, that A will break off its bond, the bracket here being the chemical bond, and be forced to move and bond to C. And this was done in 146a. Frode, who was the first person to translate Goethe's elective affinities, or this physical chemical model of human movement, where in this situation the force is something that floats between the three reactants, and it's not necessarily something that's inside of the pineal gland like Descartes said. Frode did the first English translation of Goethe's elective affinities, and in 106a he published a book called The Nemesis of Faith, in which he said that the will of a human is similar to the case where human is a ball of iron, and that the external circumstances can affect the attraction or the mind of the iron. So if the iron is on a pendulum swinging, if it is starts out at a stronger magnet as compared to a smaller magnet, it will swing to the left. But if you put a flame underneath this magnet, that is, heat changes the power of the magnet, or deionizes the arrangement of the electrons in the magnet, that the will of the iron will change and move towards a smaller magnet. So here we see Frode stating very intelligently that will is not something specifically located in the mind of the iron or the human, but that it can be changed by external circumstances. Next we have Maxwell. He, after inventing or deriving the theory of the electromagnetic field or force, wherein light is comprised of an electric field and a magnetic field that are oriented perpendicular to each other and move through space. When he was on his deathbed, he said that he did not believe that he was moved by a will or a self, but that what was done by his will was something greater than himself in him. And this was in 76A. So here's Maxwell, and he says that his last poem, called A Paradoxical Ode after Shelley. Shelley, of course, is Britain's most famous atheist. He says, we, that is, all the work we've done as waves in ether or space-time, shall forever run. So at this point, he's saying that this was a poem. He conjectures in rhyme that we are moved by waves in ether. And of course, work is defined as force moving a body through unit distance. So here we have a very modern view. And in his last few months of existence, when he was terminally ill, Maxwell commented to Fenton Hort that, I cannot thinking about the immediate circumstances which have brought a thing to pass, rather than about any will setting them in motion. What is done by what I call myself, I feel, is done by something greater than myself in me. So here, Maxwell, top 5 minds of humankind, dismisses self, just as Da Vinci did. But he can't. But that's what we're left with. Electromagnetic force is somehow the replacement for what we formerly referred to as will or self. So now we're at the Bohr model, that done in 42A, that this is the orbital structures of an atom, and for an electron to move down an orbital structure, a photon has to be ejected, which is a particle of light, or the force carrier, otherwise known as a boson. And likewise, for the same electron to move back up an orbital structure, the light has to come inward. So now we see that the source of what we call motion is somehow related to photon-electron interactions. Next, we have the Wald model, or Retinol model, solved by George Walden, A3. Note that the letter A comes before the 3, meaning that he solved the mechanism of vision in 1958, or 3 years after atoms were seen. So now we're becoming enlightened. We're in when the letter A is before the number, we're in the period of intellectual enlightenment. It means years after elements were seen by humans, by the human eye. Speaking of eye, retinol is a molecule that is located in the back of eyes. And when photons of the right wavelength shine onto the 1110 kink in the hydrocarbon structure of the molecule, it changes into the bent configuration. And when light is removed, it changes back into the vertical configuration. So if we go to the retinol page, we see retinol in the straightened configuration with no light. But here we see the mechanism where the retinol, when light shines on it, turns into the cis retinol configuration. Then when light's not there, it reverts to the trans retinol configuration. So we cannot say in this case that retinol as a molecule moves itself. Here we're starting to see the replacement for what we formerly consider as self-motion, which is a violation of the principle of inertia, and again, code for perpetual motion. So next we have, moving from walled forward, because retinol is simply a 3-element molecule, C20H28O. We move to what is called the Stirner-Ulcer-Thims model, and that a human is a 26 element comprised of carbon, hydrogen, carbon made of 10 to the 27th atoms, hydrogen 10 to the 27th atoms, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, plus 20E or 20 other elements. It's a 20E schnapps plus 20E molecular structure. And this was, and it's on a Earth surface comprised of 92 elements, or naturally occurring elements. And this model was derived in A47, or 2002. And we see a simple human, HU is short for human element or human chemical species. And here we see, since human movement is largely vision-based out of the senses, photon being the carrier of the force, or the exchange force carrier, or the boson in particle physics speak. And we can see, or crudely see, how this walled model can be scaled up to explain the Stirner-Ulcer-Thims model, or molecular model of humans, with having photon-electron interactions to the particles in its surrounding environment or space-time. So next model is the Bartels model. And this is Ludwig Bartels, is a chemist at one of the universities in California. In A49, he synthetically made a molecule called DTA, comprised of 14 carbon atoms, 10 hydrogen atoms, and 2 sulfur atoms. And this HS component of the structure are its feet. So when you heat it, it walks along, back and forth, along a copper 111 surface. Or you can make this DTA molecule move by putting an electric charge towards its head. And supposedly there's photon-electron interactions here that pull it along the surface. So if we go to the animate thing, and I click on that, here we can see there's DTA, there's retinol, and we can scroll down here, we can see GIFs of each one. There's retinol moving. There's DTA walking along the copper surface. There's AQ, another molecule. This is a molecule that carries things. So this is AQ, and it's synthesized by Bartels, and it carries 2 CO2 bundles, which are shown by the little red packages. So again, this is the smaller version of a human. And next we get, from here, we get into what is called the formation energy model of force and movement. So the divided line here is the jump from the purely chemical level, or say the non-animal or sub-animal level of chemical reaction. This was worked out by Gilbert Lewis in 32A, and he worked out what's called the formation energy table method of reactions. So he calculated formation energies for every single chemical species all the way up to 4-element species. And he did this in Berkeley. He spent about 25 years doing this. So this reaction here is hydrogen is bonded to oxygen as in the form of water. And if you throw in sodium, which is a white element into water. For example, if kids in high school like to throw in sodium into toilets and make them explode, we will see that the affinity, which is the force that sodium has for oxygen, is greater than the affinity that oxygen has for hydrogen. Therefore, if this sodium is put into the system of oxygen and hydrogen, the oxygen will detach or debond from hydrogen and bond with sodium. So this is the modern version of the reaction. Sodium plus water goes to NaOH plus H2O, H2 hydrogen gas. And here are the formation energies, or the change in the Gibbs free energy of formation that were calculated by Lewis and others. So formation energy for water from the elements in standard state is negative 286 kilojoules per mole. Formation energy of sodium in its natural state is 0, which is set by Lewis by definition. Formation energy of sodium hydroxide is negative 377 kilojoules per mole, and that of H2 gas is 0. So to calculate whether the formation energy or the change, the formation energy for the whole reaction, to see whether or not it will occur if these elements are put into contact, we subtract the formation energies of the reactants from the formation energies of, or the formation energies of the products less the formation energies of the reactants. So in this case it would be negative 377 plus 0 subtracted from this total, or 0 plus negative 286, and this comes to negative 91 kilojoules per mole. That means the negative means that energy was released from the reaction, and the negative is code for spontaneous. For example, when humans spontaneously fall in love, they will have a similar reaction like this. So if we scale this up to the human level, as Goethe did over here, we can have a man bonded to one woman, say a girlfriend he's weakly attracted to, but then if another woman, Fy sub 2, is introduced into the system who has a stronger affinity for the male, he will kick off his current girlfriend, shown by the bonding bracket, and form a reaction or new relationship with a new woman. And this will, or can be shown to have a similar formation energy. In kilojoules per mole means mass amount of reactants. In this case, the unit is called H mole, or human mole. And these details, this was first stated by me in A52 in my 2-volume human chemistry textbook in the form of human formation energy tables. So this is where we are now, and the year presently is A67, and human chemical thermodynamics is in progress, or in the direction of being written.